Welcome to History in Flames. Empires rise and fall. The past comes alive in fire and ash. Subscribe and relive stories that shaped the world. April 1942. The Philippines. 76,000 men, American and Filipino soldiers, have just surrendered to the Japanese army. They have no idea what is about to happen to them. What follows is one of the worst war crimes ever committed against American soldiers, and most people have never heard of it. It is December 1941. Japan has just bombed Pearl Harbor and launched a simultaneous invasion of the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur commands the Allied defense, but he is outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off from reinforcements. For 4 months, American and Filipino soldiers fought desperately on the Bataan Peninsula. They were starving, eating mules, monkeys, lizards, surviving on a third of their normal food rations. Disease tore through the ranks. Malaria, dysentery, beriberi. But they held. Then on March 11, 1942, General MacArthur received direct orders from President Roosevelt: leave the Philippines. He departed by PT boat in the middle of the night, leaving his men behind. Before he left, he made a promise: I shall return. His men called it something else. They called it abandonment. On April 9, 1942, Major General Edward King made the most difficult decision of his life. With no food, no medicine, and no hope of reinforcement, he surrendered. 76,000 men. The largest surrender of American-led forces in history. And the nightmare was just beginning. The Japanese had planned to transport 25,000 prisoners. Instead, they had 76,000. There was no food prepared, no water, no vehicles. The plan was simple. The prisoners would walk 65 miles through jungle and tropical heat to Camp O'Donnell. In April, in the Philippines, where temperatures reached 42 degrees Celsius, the thirst was unbearable. Men who broke from the line to drink from a ditch or a puddle were beaten or shot on the spot. Survivors described watching men drop to their knees at the sight of water. Some died drinking from contaminated pools rather than walk another step without it. Men began falling, heat stroke, exhaustion, disease already ravaging their weakened bodies. The rule the Japanese enforced was brutal and simple: keep moving or die. Those who could not stand were left where they fell, or they were not left. They were killed. Survivors testified to killings that defy comprehension. Men bayoneted for falling behind, beheaded for carrying Japanese currency which guards claimed was looting, buried alive, run over by trucks. Some Japanese officers ordered their men to use prisoners for bayonet practice. One of the most common punishments became known as the sun treatment. Prisoners were forced to sit or kneel for hours in direct tropical sun with no water and no shade. Men went blind, some went mad, some simply stopped breathing. Why did the Japanese treat prisoners this way? The answer lies in their military code, Bushido. In Japanese military culture, surrender was the ultimate disgrace. A soldier who surrendered had no honor and deserved no respect. To the Japanese commanders, these 76,000 men had already chosen death by surrendering. The march was simply finishing what they had started. Not everyone stood by. Filipino civilians along the route risked their lives to help. They threw food, rice balls, sugar cane, fruit over the guards' heads to the prisoners. Some passed water through fences. Those caught by Japanese guards were beaten or executed. Their bravery saved lives. After 30 miles on foot, the prisoners were loaded onto rail cars, but there was no relief. The cars were metal freight boxes designed for cargo. 100 men were packed into each car built for 40 in 42-degree heat. No ventilation, no water. Men suffocated standing up. Some were dead before the doors opened. The survivors called them the Iron Coffins. Those who survived the march arrived at Camp O'Donnell and found it was not a camp. It was a death trap. It's built for 10,000 soldiers. It now held 54,000 prisoners. One water spigot for the entire American section. Open latrines, no medicine. Bodies stacking up faster than they could be buried. In the first weeks at O'Donnell, Americans were dying at a rate of 30 to 50 per day. Filipino prisoners died at 10 times that rate. By the time the camp closed, An estimated 20,000 Filipino soldiers had died there. The march had ended. The dying had not. Lester Tenney was 21 years old when the march began. Survived by helping carry fallen men because groups were less likely to be executed than individuals. He later testified, "I saw things no human being should ever see. And I made a decision. I will survive. I will tell the world what happened here." A small number of prisoners managed to escape. They made it through the Philippine jungle to reach Allied lines, and they brought with them the first-hand accounts of what had happened. The U.S. military classified the information. They feared it would devastate morale. The American public would not learn the full truth until 1944. When the story broke in January 1944, it ignited a firestorm across America. Newspapers ran survivor testimonies. Recruitment offices were flooded. The Bataan Death March became a rallying cry and a promise. Every American soldier now fought, knowing what Japanese captivity meant. On January 30th, 1945, U.S. Army Rangers and Filipino guerrillas launched the raid at Cabanatuan, one of the most successful rescue missions in military history. 511 surviving Bataan prisoners were freed. They were skeletal, some weighed less than 40 kilograms, but they were alive. After Japan surrendered in 1945, the war crimes trials began. General Masahiro Hama, the Japanese commander responsible for the Bataan campaign, was tried. Convicted and executed by firing squad in April 1946, he claimed he had no knowledge of the atrocities. Survivors did not believe him. The final toll of the 76,000 who began the march between 7,000 and 12,000 died before reaching Camp O'Donnell. Up to 20,000 more died in the camp itself. Over a third of all men who surrendered at Bataan never came home. They were not killed in battle. They were murdered while prisoners. For decades, Bataan survivors felt forgotten. Unlike Dadae or Iwo Jima, their story was rarely taught in schools. Veterans organized annual Bataan Memorial Death Marches, 26-mile walks in the New Mexico desert to keep the memory alive. Many marched into their 80s and 90s. The Bataan Death March lasted 12 days. Its consequences lasted lifetimes. The men who survived carried physical and psychological wounds for the rest of their lives. They came home to a country that had moved on to a war that had bigger stories, bigger battles, bigger names. But what happened on that road in April 1942 deserves to be remembered. These men were not defeated. They were betrayed, abandoned, and still they endured. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts below.